Hello, welcome to Ivan Minis. Today I want to talk about my Elegoo Mars printer, and this is my setup here with the printer and the wash station. Excuse the wobbly footage, my daughter insisted on doing this with my phone, so interesting angles. But I wanted to talk about the sort of maintenance of the printer and also reusing the IPA, the Isopropanol alcohol, which is in that tank there washing the orcs. And the reason you need to wash them is because I'm using the standard resin, and as you can see here, when it comes out of the printer, it's got some residue on it which you need to wash off, and the standard resin needs alcohol to wash it off. You can get water washable resin. I haven't tried that yet, but I'm getting fantastic results, replacing a lot of my HeroQuest miniatures with 3D printed models. These orcs and goblins, I'm really happy with those, and mummies and all sorts of other bits and pieces. I've done bits and pieces for 40k as well, whole models as well as scattered terrain and bits like that, and some nice sort of Christmassy stuff. These are all from other videos that I've done. If you've not seen them, subscribe to the channel, pop along, have a look at the older videos of me getting these things painted up, and I think it's great. I've ended up with some models like these which you can't tell which bits were original plastic or resin miniatures and which bits were 3D printed. That Santa Dwarf is completely 3D printed, whereas the big Santa Ogre, Santa Boris, he's a resin cast with some 3D printed bits underneath. So it's been, I guess, maybe best part of a year that I've been using this printer properly, and this is the IPA tank with the alcohol in. You can see it's very milky. Now this is partly because I tried to clean it a few days before this and completely cocked it up and had some problems. So I'm hoping this video will show you the problems I had and all the steps I took to rectify those. Will hopefully mean that I can do it easier in the future, and maybe it will help you as well. Obviously gloves are important because you don't want to get loads of this isopropanol alcohol on your fingers, and you certainly don't want to get the resin on you either because it's not very nice. But all of this stuff is what I got to try and sort it all out. The wipes and the spray cleaner are very useful anyway, and you need some funnels and all that kind of stuff. And coffee filters. I happen to have a load of coffee filters in the cupboard, which was lucky, but I found a great video by Habees Hobbies, which is what sort of pushed me to try this. So this is the problem I created for myself. I took these big tubs out of the kitchen. My wife was out, so she didn't notice. I figured they'd be all right because I was going to filter and they would just end up with clean IPA in. That was the plan. And in theory, you can then wash it out and they'd still be okay to use. You can see here they're covered with resin. So what I didn't appreciate was how much resin was inside the IPA, dissolved in it, and was then going to get cured by being out in the sun, because I decided to do it outside, nice for ventilation. I found that it all started to cure and stick to the inside of these tubs, which was not ideal. You can see they do clean quite nicely with that alcohol spray. Give it a good old spray, let that stay for a little bit, and then a bit of paper towel. It comes out quite nicely. But it's never going to be food safe again, so I had to buy some new ones to replace these in the kitchen. But they became my new tank cleaning things for 3D printing. So silver linings. I think that you'll see later in the video I started using some old empty bottles, which is what Habees Hobbies did, but I hadn't seen that video before this point, so I didn't know what I was doing. Anyway, you can see that there's a lot of stuff here. It's quite difficult to pour it, so it's quite useful to have one of these kind of tough trays. They're great. They're the sort of things you can mix cement on and stuff like that, and they have it down at the nursery for my youngest daughter. I didn't use that the first time, so I kind of ended up mucking up the garden table quite a bit, which was another mistake. So use a tough tray or something like that, because it makes it a lot easier to clean up afterwards. I poured them into the coffee filters. I'm using both of the tubs. I only have one huge funnel and one smaller one, so it's a bit of a balancing act with the small one. But you can see there they're very slowly going through. The resin gets filtered by the coffee filter, but starts to block it up quite quickly. So you can see here it's going through, it's working, it's doing its thing, but you have to be quite patient with it. And I guess all the time you're outside doing it, it is curing some of the resin. You can see there the sort of gloopiness that's in it. It's quite strange. It doesn't cure sort of quite normally, I guess, because it's so saturated with the alcohol. I think that in future it'll be more useful to pour these into old juice bottles or something, which is what was suggested, and leave them for a few days in the sun to completely cure and settle out all the resin that's in there. You can see gradually you're starting to get slightly cleaner stuff through. Obviously these tubs will need another clean after this, but it's not as bad as it was the first time. So a lot of the resin has come out of solution and started to get cleaned up. But as I discovered, you can see bits of it left in the coffee filter there. As I discovered, you needed to do quite a few passes through these filters to really start getting it all out. Maybe that's because some of it was still dissolved in the IPAs that was going through. But this is the real problem I created for myself, which was I tried to just filter it out when it was in the wash tank, and it's ended up curing in the wash tank and leaving a load of gunk in the bottom, which is really not ideal. And the reason I noticed it in the first place was because it was leaving a little bit of gunk on one of the models that I was cleaning. I printed out a Gobsmasher tank for my Orcs, an old school tank, and it came with this rough texture when it came out of the curing station. And I thought it didn't make much sense why it had this texture, and I concluded it must have come from the wash station. I kind of figured with this tank it's not too much of a problem. It's a rough Orc tank. It kind of looks a bit like Zimmerite that you see on World War II German tanks occasionally. So I kind of think for this model it's not so bad, but in general I don't want to see it happen again. So the easiest thing would be just to replace the IPA completely in the tank. But 7-8 quid for a litre. You need a couple of litres in the tank really. You can get a bit of a discount buying it in bulk. I tend to buy it on Amazon because that's quite easy. But I thought maybe I can be more responsible, maybe I can reuse it, maybe I can save a bit of money if I can clean the stuff up and get rid of the resin. So there are other consumables that you need. You need gloves anyway, because the IPA is dangerous to your skin, so is the uncured resin. But I found that you need to have more gloves for doing this cleaning process because it's very laborious. It's difficult to reuse the gloves. You take them off, have to throw them away. Also have to throw away coffee filters. So there is some wastage there, but the coffee filters are pretty cheap. Get a couple of hundred for 8 quid. But you do end up having to throw away quite a lot of gloves and the filters because they get all clogged up with resin. But overall, it's probably going to be cheaper doing it this way than replacing the IPA every time in a tank. But, if we want to talk about the cost-saving element of it, we really need to talk about the time-saving element as well, or the time-cost element, I suppose. In this case, it took me ages to sort all this out. This was a very time-consuming process because I was fixing the issues that I had caused for myself by sort of winging it previously. And sometimes I think winging it's a good idea because you can kind of work it out as you go along. Sometimes it's useful, but sometimes you need to really get a bit of advice on what you're doing. So here I'm using the IPA spray to really clean out the inside of the wash station itself, because that's where all the resin has cured and adhered to the inside of that tub. That was quite difficult to get that all completely cleared out, but once I'd done that, then I could move on to doing the rest of it. So with everything cleaned, the mistakes of the past washed away, I had this situation. One tub with slightly dirty IPA in it, only a small amount, one tub with medium dirty IPA, and one old juice bottle that I'd rinsed out with filthy IPA, full of resin. So the clean wash station was filled with a litre of IPA. Fresh IPA gave me another bottle that I could play with to be able to filter things into, and also meant that the wash station had a kind of basis of clean IPA that I was going to add any cleaned up IPA into. Make sure you put the lid on, stop evaporation, and stick that inside in the dark. So then I started going through a kind of refinement process where I took the tub which had the cleanest IPA in. There was still a lot of solids there, so I carefully poured as much of the liquid from on top of the solids into a filter to go into the old IPA bottle. So hopefully that was getting the cleanest stuff into it, and I was maintaining the solids in the tub. This kind of showed that leaving it out for longer helps, because if you leave it out for longer, more of the resin cures, more of it settles out to the bottom, and you get the separation between IPA sitting on top of the resin as it settles out. So the idea was I try and get the cleanest stuff into this IPA bottle, and then I could funnel the solids into the old juice bottle, and the juice bottle could be thrown away at the end. I hadn't decided if I was going to try and filter it out at this stage. I thought maybe I'll just try and save a little bit of IPA, at least that's something, and I will have learnt something about the process by doing that. So here it goes, dripping away through that big funnel in the coffee filter. It's taking its time. You just have to be patient, I think that's the key. And you can see it's gradually dripping through. That IPA in the bottom there is still slightly milky, so it's still got a bit of resin in there, but it's a hell of a lot better than it was in the first place. So I mean, what I think it is that this is just a time-consuming process, and you have to be patient with it. Is it worth it? That's up to you. I mean, if you can just safely dispose of your dirty IPA and buy some new stuff, it's going to save you some time. But perhaps it's worth doing. I mean, it's really interesting when you look on the right there. You can see it's really gunky and it's all settling out. So there was so much there, I decided I would actually try to get the solids out of the really dirty bottle as well. So I've been using a sieve, just bought some cheap sieves on Amazon. Again, you know, that's a little bit more cost, which maybe it's not worth it, I don't know. But at least I can reuse those sieves in the future, not for food, obviously, but for this sort of stuff. And it's catching a lot of those big bits of resin. So again, I think leaving it out for longer, so it all kind of cures more and settles out more, will make it easier to separate the solids from the liquid. So this is, broadly speaking, I think the plan I'll have going forwards is to do it in stages, you know, have a really dirty one, a less dirty one, and then a clean one, and gradually sort of go through it in sequence to really remove all those solids. Like I said before, I'm going to try and do this a little bit more regularly, not leave it to get as much resin in the IPA. So hopefully next time it'll be a lot quicker and easier. I'm also saving up some old juice bottles so that I can use those to sort of leave it out and cure it. So I think the process that I'm doing here can be better. I just wanted to show how I was kind of going through the process of learning it, I suppose, because it was something that was new to me, and it went so horribly wrong when I tried it the first time that I thought it was worth showing how I kind of fix that issue and then try to improve it. So maybe I'll do another video in the future of it going a bit more smoothly, and hopefully that will make it a bit less scary. I mean, I think 3D printing is so brilliant. I really like my Mars 3 Pro. It's fantastic. I've seen they've got a new Mars 5 now, which looks pretty amazing. The cost of these things is coming down and down. It's so much more affordable and easy to 3D print. You know, years and years ago, I had a filament printer, which was, you know, quite early on when they were coming out and being made available to the public. But it wasn't wonderful, but I had a good time using it. But I don't think 3D printing is for everyone. I've said to one of my very close mates, I play a lot of games with him, I said, I probably wouldn't get one if I was him. He was quite keen. Well, he was thinking about it anyway. I don't think he was keen, but he was thinking about it because it would give him the freedom to print off any model that he wanted. But there's quite a lot of an involved process with doing it. All the calibrations and all the maintenance. I think he'd probably end up throwing the printer out the window before it really paid for itself. So you've got to be quite willing to put in the extra effort and experiment, really. And if you do that, it will pay off. You know, you'll be able to print off all sorts of models and, you know, enjoy using it. But if you don't enjoy the kind of background stuff of maintaining the printer, you're not going to enjoy doing it in general, I would say. But as long as everything is maintained nicely and calibrated well, it's dead easy to print stuff. You know, you've got your 3D printer all set up. You just need to make sure you give your resin a good shake in the bottle. I'm using the standard version 2 resin from Elegoo here. I've got some other resin, ABS-like resin, I'm going to try out, see if that works better for models. But there's a bunch of different resins you can try. I've had good results with this so far. The only problem I've had is where it's been a bit too brittle on things like spear tips and things like that, where they're particularly thin. But it's simplicity itself. You plug it in, pour the resin in the tank, make sure you've got the lid closed, and then you have your file and put it in. One thing I didn't know was the file type you've got to have on the USB stick. Chitubox is what is the slicing software that they use, that they sort of give you with your Elegoo printer, and you need to make sure you export a sliced file in a .ctb format, which I didn't know. I thought you could just chuck an STL into the printer and do it, but no, you've got to actually do all the support to make sure it's sliced properly in the software first. So as long as you go through those little steps and you're following what you're supposed to be doing, it's all nice and easy. I thought I'd just talk about one other little thing, which was calibration, and the Habees Hobbies video that I was watching, which gave me some hints on improving the IPA tank cleaning. I'll link it below. That video put me onto something called the Cones of Calibration, which sounded like an interesting thing to check out. So these Cones of Calibration can be downloaded for free from Table Flip Foundry. They've got a few other bits and pieces you can download as well. But the idea is that you download this STL and print it out on your printer, and it will give you an immediate indication of whether you've got the right settings in terms of exposure time, because the resin's being cured by the UV light in the printer, and if you've got the settings wrong, it can overexpose or underexpose, and that can cause problems down the line. I didn't really think that I had any problems with that on my printer, but seeing as I saw this thing was there, I thought it was worth giving it a go, just to sort of double check and set my mind at ease, really, that I was on the right lines. So you print it off by itself, nothing else on the build plate, and here it is. It's come off the printer, and that's fine. And then I put it in the wash station with my newly cleaned IPA, gave it a little wash, and then stuck it in a curing station. I do like the way that the single machine can be used for cleaning and for curing. It's quite clever, but make sure you've got it on the right setting, because I've made that mistake in the past. So anyway, it goes around, gets all cured with UV, and then comes out looking something like this. Table Flip Foundry logo on there. It's a very small little thing, and the idea is that all the cones should print properly on the success side and should not print properly on the failure side. I have no idea what makes them succeed or fail. I don't know how they've made it work. I kind of looked through a cross-section of it on the software, and I couldn't see any difference between the two sides. So I don't know how it works, but it seems to, and my settings seem to be right, because none of the cones on the failure side are connecting to one another, and it all worked on the success side, so I think my settings are fine, as when it comes to the exposure times and that sort of stuff. Of course, making sure your Z axis is correct is one of the key things as well. I won't go into that in this video, but what I will say is to remember to sort of maintain your filter. So this is the last thing I wanted to talk about, was just I noticed that it suddenly became more smelly. The little filters that Elegoo give you in the printers, I think, seem to work really, really well. No odours coming out of the printer ordinarily, but all of a sudden there was some. Clearly the filter needed changing. I think it's a bit weird that you can't just replace the filter inside this little device. You get two whole new devices when you order them. But what I've seen of the Mars 5, it looks like there's a separate kind of filter external to that where you just replace the filter bit inside. But they seem to work really well, and they're not very expensive. So I bought a couple of new ones and we'll replace it now. So I hope that's been a useful little video for anyone that's thinking about 3D printing or having problems with their IPA tank or whatever. The conclusion I've got is that you can filter your IPA and reuse it. Whether you want to do that is entirely up to you. It may or may not be worth it to you. But I think it can be done quicker and easier than the way that I did it to start with, because I made a mistake. So hopefully this shows you how you can correct that mistake and sort it all out. 3D printers, I think, are wonderful. Very happy with it, but they are quite finicky. And as long as you've got everything maintained properly, they can be really worthwhile. But it's worth finding out a bit more and going through a bit of trial and error to see what works for you. Anyway, I hope that's been useful and mildly entertaining. If you'd like to be further entertained by my videos, then please do check out the rest of the channel, subscribe and like and all that kind of good stuff. And hopefully I'll see you on the next one, get some painting done. Right, cheers.